Good morning, FASTrack parents and guardians. Delighted to bring another video to you today on October 2nd. Today, I'm joined by Katie Harrison of the University of Mississippi Counseling Center. She's a counselor there, and I'm also joined by Dr. Merv Matthew in the Department of Psychology. And if your FASTrack student is taking psychology, he is the professor. So we're going to talk to both of them a little bit today, and then I'm going to answer the questions that you all submitted. Thank you for those. I always enjoy getting those from you and responding, but then also being able to extract that information and circulate it to everyone through the videos. So first, we're going to talk with Katie with the Counseling Center. And so Katie, we know it is no secret that this plague, this pandemic, has exacerbated everything that's bad and made everything that's good a little less good. Let's just be honest, and mental health has been something that that has deteriorated for probably most of us throughout this pandemic. And then also we're dealing with these parents and guardians in FASTrack are dealing with young people who had their senior year interrupted, most of them, and have come to college under the bizarrest of circumstances. And we know that, as I repeat myself every time I get on one of these videos, we are asking at this university, but then also at all universities right now, asking things of our students that under any other circumstances would be unacceptable. And we recognize the mental toll that takes. And so I just wanted to ask if you could talk a little bit about the resources that the Counseling Center provides, and also, how a student might go about procuring them, and then any other things you think that a parent and guardian would want to know for their first year student.
Absolutely. Yes, I think I can agree with you. I think we have all struggled to find our new norm. And sometimes even just to keep up with, the day-to-day tasks that we're faced with in a pandemic. I've never been through a pandemic. I'm assuming no one else has. And so this is all very new. And so, I think for students, it is important to remember that we are all going through the same thing. I have so many students that I sit with that say exactly the same things that I think when I'm not on camera. And so, just to normalize that we're all struggling right now, and that's okay. And at the same time, it's okay, and there's people that you can go to. And so at the Counseling Center, we've worked really hard to put some things in place where, if a student is on campus in Oxford, if a student is on campus in the DeSoto Center, or if a student is at home on the coast in Mississippi, they can connect with one of us and talk about, how they're dealing with the struggles and maybe figure out some better ways to cope with getting through this. And so the ways that they go about doing that is through telemental health. And so we have started telemental health at the Counseling Center. It started in March, and we are pretty much fully telemental health at this point. We do have counselors that are on campus in our office in Lester Hall, and they are there primarily for students who are in a crisis and really need to come in. But if a student is, capable of doing telemental health and appropriate for telemental health, then that's really the safest thing I think that we can do right now for our students, for our staff, for everyone. It's been my experience that students, this is what they do all day. And so they're comfortable with it. They enjoy it. They appreciate it. It works really well with their schedules to be able to find an hour versus maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours to get to campus and find parking and that kind of thing. So overall, we've had really good success with it. And so they would contact the Counseling Center, and I'm happy to share that information as well.
I'll put all of that in the description section of this video on YouTube. So.
That'd be great. Yeah. And so just contact the Counseling Center, give us a call. we'll set you up for an initial assessment, which is basically how you start the process of getting counseling. If you're unsure if you want counseling, we'll just set you up with consultation, and one of us will talk with the student and say, here's kind of what it's like, and here's, you know, what your services are, and is this something that you maybe want to go forward with? Again, if so, we'll get them set up. We offer, you know, a pretty wide range of services. So again, it may be, you know, I just need to come once and kind of talk through something. And so that would just be, you know, a consultation, kind of a next day session. It may be that you want to do a little more extensive work. And so we would set the student up for an initial assessment. They would meet with one of our counselors. We would get all the information, and then we would start individual counseling with that student. Typically that looks like once a week. And then we also offer group sessions. And so we are doing groups. We push groups pretty heavily at the counseling center. We find that students really enjoy the groups once they're in there. And so that's different. We've never done telemental health groups, but now we are. And so we have a few of those up and running, and they're going well. Again, students are very adaptable.
So Katie, are those group sessions, are they topical?
Yes, so most of them are. Currently right now, there is a grad student group that I'm running. I know that's up and running. And then there are some substance use groups that are running right now, but typically we offer usually anywhere between 8 to 12 different topical groups. And that may be anything from students that have experienced an assault or an abuse. That could be international students. We have an international student group. We've had a women of color group. We've had dealing with distress, feeding your feelings. You know, we have a host of groups. They're all listed on our website.
Okay. Yeah. I'll list the group specifically in a separate link.
Yes. And they're all confidential as well. And so everything we do at the counseling center is confidential. That's one of the main questions I think we get from students and parents is, you know, will my parents know, or can my parents call and find out? We are confidential. And so a lot of times for students, it's not that they want to keep something from parents, but that is important for them.
Yeah. Right. So can I ask a few rapid fire questions?
Go for it.
Okay. So if I'm wanting to set up a session, I go to the website, and then is making a phone call the best way to do it, or do I send an email making a phone call?
Yeah.
And that phone is staffed 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, Central Time?
Absolutely.
Okay. And typically, I know it probably varies, but typically, how long is the lag time between like me wanting to make an initial consultation and then me having that consultation?
Mm-hmm. So for a consultation, you can get one as quickly as the next day. Okay. So we have times allotted for that. We also have what we call a triage appointment. And so if there's a crisis and there's a need to speak to a counselor right then, we have that every day from noon to 5.
Okay. So you call and say that if you're feeling like you need to, you can, that can be part of what you say whenever you call. Okay.
Yeah. And so if you're calling and you just know you want to have some counseling, it's not a crisis, not necessarily a one-time shot. It kind of depends. Right now we're on midterm week, I believe. And so we definitely are booking out a little further, maybe a week and a half to get that IA. Typically, again, as the semester goes on, that only gets a little bit longer because we get busier, but yeah. Great.
So if here's another question.
Sure.
What is the price for a student for your services?
So we do not charge. Any student that is enrolled in any hour on campus has free access to the counseling center.
I always say free is better than cheap.
It is.
You know, and okay, that's great to know. And I guess I would say, if there are some things that maybe you would want to, if you were in a session with someone that was just feeling overwhelmed with adjusting to college, especially with all the things they're having to do virtually and how they're having to manage their time this way, and just the stress is exacerbating. As general as you could describe it, what are some things you would do to encourage that student? Because I would love for the parents and guardians watching this video just to be able to, not play the role of counselor. Obviously, like, it's super important that students that feel like they need to seek mental health counseling do it. But just some general things that maybe you would recommend that a parent and guardian pass on to their student.
Yeah, I think the biggest one that I've noticed is, again, normalizing that everyone is struggling right now. And I think, I think this idea of being united in our struggles, pandemic, national things going on with our country, being a new student, being, adjusting to college, being out on your, there's a lot of stuff to deal with. And so I can, most definitely empathize with these students.
Yeah.
And so I think, normalizing that it's okay to be struggling right now, and then really focusing on, how the student's going to get through this. And so most of my students, it has been breaking it down into a day by day kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think the overwhelming idea of what the next 6 months is going to look like is difficult. It's difficult for me.
Sure.
And so I think focusing on getting through day by day, and focusing on what the student needs to focus on and what they're in control of right now. And for most students, that is, being in college and doing well in college.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely true. And I definitely feel like, I've been working with freshmen for a long time, and every year, I have students that get a case of the everybody else's, is what I call them, which means they think everybody else is connecting. Everybody else has got their time figured out. Everybody else has tons of friends. No one else is lonely, etc. And I'm saying that, like, that's not true. That is in your head. And then it's even, like I said before, it's exacerbated by the pandemic. And so recognizing that it is okay not to be okay, and that this is a process that's going to take time. And quite frankly, it's going to take more time than it normally does because so yeah, that's great advice. Well, Katie, I'm going to link all the counseling center stuff in the description of this video. I cannot thank you enough for your time. And I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. And if there's questions, feel free to give us a call.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. So now I'm going to turn it over to conversation with Merv Matthew, professor of psychology, and he is teaching Psychology 201 this semester. So Merv, can you tell us a little bit about how you've, obviously, anybody that's been at the University of Mississippi for more than a semester knows Merv is an engaging lecturer and someone that, a campus favorite, if you will, amongst professors, but obviously things look different this semester. Can you talk about just a little bit about like how you've structured your class to fit the pandemic protocols, please?
Yeah, first of all, am I unmuted? Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, thanks for having me. So when it came down to structuring this course, it was actually because of the way that I usually structure it, with a lot of lecture, a lot of engagement between professor and students amongst each other, the most difficult for me to rearrange. And amongst all the classes that I'm teaching this semester, this is the one that I feel the saddest about not being in person. Because usually we have a lot of students that are in the class that are asking a bunch of questions, some weird and wacky, but they're all moving the conversation forward. And now it doesn't really work that way. Now we have a lot of people that, it almost feels like I'm teaching a bunch of individual classes rather than one class altogether. So the way that we have this set up, not just for my section, but for all the Psych 201 sections this semester, is that they're all online, and the students are doing a lot of the heavy lifting themselves. So there's a lot of reading that's assigned with it. And then they also have writing assignments. So a lot of the interaction that the students get with us and with the TAs is through those writing assignments. For each chapter that the students read, they have a short inquisitive assignment. And what that's meant to do is to give them the opportunity to test themselves on the material and also to learn at the same time. So it's not just summative assessment, but also formative assessment. Since I can't be there with them in class answering their questions in real time, the inquisitive assignments are helping out with that, where they're putting in their answers. If they give a wrong answer, it doesn't just say, okay, wrong, and leave. It says, okay, that answer is not correct. Let's say they wagered 100 points on it. That question was incorrect. You lost 100 points, but let's try this again. Here's a hint. And if you get this correct, then you get back 50 of the points that you lost. And the students can keep on doing this over and over again. So even if they're losing points on each individual answer, eventually, if they just stick with it and they're taking the hints and getting feedback and all of that, then if they stick with it long enough, then they can still end up with 100% on that assignment.
Yeah. Okay. Huh. That's a great way to do it. Because I know that one of the things that I've heard you talk about in the past, and one of the things I try to explain to freshman students generally, is that in college, and then specifically in your class, when you're giving a test, you're not looking to see if they've memorized the correct answer. You're looking to see if they've understood the concept. It's like that idea of having, a big picture of several rows of copper coins, and only one of them, they all look a little similar, but only one of them is the actual penny. Where it might be easy if you asked me, if you said, hey, Gray, what's a penny look like? I could say, oh, I know what a penny looks like. But then if I actually look at other similar looking copper coins, I couldn't tell you which one's the penny, right? There's different nuances on there. And I feel like having that ability to wager, retake the test, and know that it's, redo the assignment and get little hints so you can actually conceptualize the information is a really effective way to do it if you can't be in person going back and forth.
Yeah, it was one of those things that obviously I prefer to be with them interacting, but having that as a possible tool to use to try to give them, because we don't want just only summative assessments, right? We don't want the students to get only you're right or wrong and then that's it.
Right.
Because usually if they were in class, they'd get formative assessment. They'd be getting a chance to be wrong and get feedback on it before it counted toward their grade.
Yeah,
so
that's how you learn.
So what we're doing here is it still counts toward their grade, but they get a chance to be wrong, correct it, and then improve the grade later on. So a student might do really poorly the first time out that they do that assignment. They might get, let's say, 50% on it. But that 50% is not their final grade on that assignment until the deadline passes. So they can keep on going with it, keep learning, keep improving. And by the time the assignment's deadline hits, they've gotten to their 100%.
Right. Okay. So yes, starting early is really important.
Definitely. It's starting early is usually important no matter what. But this semester, it's even more important because there's a lot more that students have to do on their own. The assessments that my TAs and I give to them, the feedback we don't get a chance to give feedback to them in person. So if they have something that's due on, let's say, by midnight on Sunday, and they email us at 10 o'clock on Sunday, there's nothing we can do with that. Whereas I've had some students that, when they're looking at the assignment that's due before midnight on Sunday, their written assignments, I'll talk about those again in a moment. But when they have the assignments that are due before midnight on Sunday, if they get to me on Wednesday or Thursday of the week before that, there's time for me to give feedback. There's time for me to help out and clarify some points so that they can, by the time they turn in their assignment, be in good shape. So getting started early matters every semester, but it especially matters this semester because that email interaction, that's really the only chance, aside from like Zoom office hours, for example, that's a chance for face-to-face, but other than that, there's no chance for that face-to-face immediate interaction that we'd normally be getting.
Yeah. So it's not too late to start early for your students. I know it's October 2nd, but with the assignments going forward, that was something you would strongly recommend.
I would very strongly recommend starting early with those, especially, so the written assignments, let me clarify what those are also. So the way that we have this set up is that they have 3 exams. So they have 15 chapters. For the first 5 are exam 1, 6 through 10 are exam 2, and then their final is just exam 3. It's not a cumulative final.
Right.
Each of those exams is worth 20% of their grade.
Okay.
So that's 60%.
Right.
The inquisitive assignments that I talked about already, those are worth, I believe we set that to be like another 10%.
Uh-huh.
And then they have practice exams before the actual exam. So the practice exam is set up the same way as the actual exam. They have a 1-hour time limit for both. So they go through the practice exam, get a chance to see how they did on that. After they figure out how they did on the practice exam, it highlights where they're strong, where they're weak, and then they can prepare themselves for the actual exam. So when I was just looking over the grades, I saw that, I was just looking over before we went online here, I saw that the class overall averaged about a B- on the practice exam, and then it went up to a B, a solid B average on the actual exam. So you had some people that performed better on the actual exam than the practice exam because they learned from what they made mistakes with earlier on, and they're able to build on that. The remaining 20% will be written assignments. So the reason that we have these written assignments in there is that we don't want it to be just a bunch of multiple choice and fill in the blank. We want something where students need to get in there and engage with the material. Mm-hmm. So the written assignments give them a chance, and they have one of these for each chapter that they cover, well, for each module that they cover. Sometimes we have 2 chapters in a module. But the written assignments allow them to get in there and wrestle with the material. So they explain some concept that they read about in the textbook, come up with examples from their own life, mm-hmm. and then explain how what they learned from the textbook applies to the examples that they came up with. So a recent one, for example, had them studying Piaget's stages of cognitive development, mm-hmm. from when you have the sensory motor stage in infancy all the way to formal operations when you're in adolescence and then moving into adulthood. That assignment asked them to think about a favorite toy from childhood. And then after they think about a favorite toy from childhood, then they come up with which stage of Piaget's stages that toy would correspond to. So they could say, for example, this toy corresponds to concrete operations, because in order to be able to use it, the students need to be able to think in terms of math and be able to count and so forth. Right. And then we can ask them, think about that favorite toy and how would you change it so that it would match a different stage? So if you want it to be pre-operational, before the kids are able to count, before the kids are able to think about multiple aspects of something, how would you change that around? So then they can make those changes too, make those adjustments also. And that allows them to take the material that they're learning about and connect it to their own lives, which incidentally is what the textbook's title is. The name of our textbook is Psychology in Your Life. So that is also worth the remaining 20% of their grade. The remaining 20% of their grade overall is their average on these written assignments that are based not on just regurgitating information, but on showing their understanding of how that information can apply to them. Right, applied concepts for sure. Personally applying. Awesome, yeah. Well, that's really helpful. And I think that this, just laying out the way the course is structured from your end, hearing it from you, I know is going to be helpful to the parents and guardians watching this for how they can encourage their student. Do you have any other, and then you also talked about getting in touch with you. Email is the best way, correct? Yeah, the best way to contact me is through email. I have an email link directly on Blackboard. It's not, but I have an email link in the syllabus also, but there's also just a separate course menu item that's only for emailing me. It says email your professor, and they just connect that. Right. And then they also have another link for our 2 teaching assistants. Uh-huh. And because we're in the FASTrack section, we have supplementary instruction. So the students also get another, she's an undergrad, but she's somebody who's upperclassman. I believe she's a junior right now. And she's taken the class before and did really well with it. And she structures a lot of these sessions, 3 of them per week, where the students can come in and get extra help with the material. So she does it in a lot more of a gamification type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than lecturing, it's a lot more like the students are like answering trivia questions and so forth and playing games against each other.
Right.
And we have 3 of those each week. And then in addition to having 3 of those each week, she also does a review session before each exam.
Mm-hmm.
So they have plenty of different resources there. And they also have her contact information sitting there on Blackboard.
Okay.
I just want to make sure while we're pointing this out that both my TAs and our SI leader have reported some students emailing them about something that's not their province. So when it comes down to things like the written assignments, email the TAs about that.
Okay.
Don't email the SI leader for that. But if it comes down to something like the review session, the SI leader is in charge of the review session, and so you email her for that too.
Right.
So students just need to make sure that they're contacting the correct person for whatever information they're looking for. They can contact me for anything.
Gotcha.
If they're focusing on just, I didn't understand how my written assignment was graded. Why did I get an 80 instead of a 90? Contact the TAs because they're the ones who grade those directly.
Gotcha.
And if you have questions about the review sessions or questions about when the next SI session is, contact the SI leader because he's the one that governs those.
And all that can be found on the Blackboard.
All of that is on Blackboard. I have a lot of that information in the syllabus, and then there's a separate tab for the TAs, also in that course menu, and a separate tab for supplemental instruction, also in that course menu. So we have all of those out in front rather than just sitting only in the syllabus, just because having taught college for long enough, no one reads the syllabus.
Right.
No one. So if you bury that information only in the syllabus, then they're probably not going to find it.
Right. Yeah. So your child, one way to get ahead is if they're reading their syllabus and really following them. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time, Merv. And I feel like this is going to be really helpful to the parents and guardians that are encouraging students. Do you have any last thing that you think you would want to communicate you'd want parents and guardians to communicate to their student?
So far, the class is doing well.
Okay.
And just looking at the way that the class did on the practice exam and then the overall exam, the class is doing well. And quiz of assignments, they're doing well. So the students, by and large, are in good shape. Now, there's some individual students that are having difficulties, and we're working with some of those who've reached out to us. But those students who are having difficulties need to come to us.
Yes.
Because there are way more of them.
Right.
There are only a few of us. So if they're having difficulties, they need to reach out to us to get the help that they need. And many of them have done that, but not all of them have. So if a student is having difficulties, make sure that they're contacting us because we can't just go to all of them. There are just too many of them.
For sure. For sure. Okay. Well, Merv, I can't thank you enough for your time. Have a good weekend. And we'll be in touch.
Always a pleasure. Take care.
All right. See you, bud. All right. I'm going to now answer your questions that you've submitted this week. Thanks again for those. And I will have information about I will have information about the counseling center and Merv's contact info. Again, I wouldn't recommend you emailing Merv. I would recommend your child doing that if you're in the psychology class. And some of you may say, well, my son's not in psychology, my son or daughter's not in psychology, or my student's not in psychology. And so that wasn't helpful to me. I hear that, and and we're going to, most of your students, if your student's not in psychology, more than likely they're in our sociology section, which we'll have Dr. Jackson on hopefully in a couple of weeks to talk about that. But I do think that Psychology 201, I really recommend taking it with Merv another semester. It's an elective that is probably as flexible as any class on this campus, no matter what you're majoring in. Taking a psychology elective is something I recommend, and especially with Dr. Matthew. He is just one of the teaching gems on this campus that is full of other teaching gems, but he's a real special one. So I'm going to do my best to answer the questions you all have sent this week. I really appreciate that. And also I'm going to link in the descriptions, but I'm going to share my screen really quick and show you guys that if you go to, here it is, if you go to fasttrack.olemiss.edu and then you click on newsletter and events, see where my cursor is. Here are some events that we're doing right now to try to just engage students. We recognize, I hear, your voice is being heard. A lot of you are telling me in your in our correspondence that you're really wanting ways for your students to connect with other FASTrack students. And to be honest, it's been tough navigating how exactly we can do that in person under the guidelines of pandemic protocols on our campus. But we have been researching that, and we finally feel like we've got some things that we're going to be able to, some more things that we're going to be able to offer. So as you can see, the voter registration event was last night, but then we've got Campus Rec leading a kickboxing class by Zoom. And then we're going to do FASTrack Fridays, the last 2 weekends, or the last 2 Fridays in October. So those are going to be at the Grove from 11 to 2 o'clock, and then on the 30th from 11 to 3 o'clock. And we're going to have more details about those soon, but those are going to be 2 opportunities to connect safely in person on campus in the Grove. And we also are going to have a movie night, which will be over Zoom. And yeah, so we're trying to do more and more things to give your students a chance to connect with one another through FASTrack. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let's go back to, or let's start answering the questions. Again, I always appreciate so much you guys taking the time to do that. And this dovetail, the FASTrack events that I just showed you all on our website, and I will link those in the description of this video, dovetail nicely into this first question that says, since students spend the majority of time in their residence halls, what are the halls, floors, and dorms doing to help introduce students to each other? Obviously, we're trying to do some of that with FASTrack, but as far as the as far as your students' floor or residence hall, that would be a question to reach out to their community assistant about. Those used to be called RAs, now they're CAs, community assistants. Every floor has a CA, and they are trained and prepared and eager to help students feel connected. And so that's something that I would urge your child to go and talk to go and talk to their CA and just ask them about things that are happening in the semester, happening this semester in their dorm and on their floor. I know that each CA is responsible for creating multiple events each semester for people to connect, and usually those are, or I think exclusively those are advertised on the on a bulletin board in the hallways by the elevators. So there should be some things that your student is seeing kind of pop up, but they can always talk to the CA about that. So another great question just about, well, I'm not going to just try to describe the question. I'd rather just read it to you. So given this semester has been entirely remote learning, what advantages / benefits typically seen in in-person learning is still gained by remote learning in FASTrack? That's a great question that I wish I had like just copious amounts of, flowery good answers that made us, that made myself, FASTrack, and University of Mississippi all look good. But I've got to tell you, I've got to be honest that there is a lot that is lost right now because of the plague, because of the pandemic. But the reality is access to things like this, being able to have each of your students have a FASTrack academic mentor who is someone they can turn to and they can talk to about different things. all of your students are in a cohort with the same EDHE 105 and the same writing 101 class and either the same sociology or psychology class. So they have some students that they are getting to see in person that they can study with, they can share best practices with, if you will, to use kind of a clinical business term, but basically that they can lean on as they're trying to navigate this semester. Also, all of our sections of EDHE 105, with the exception of one for students that opted out of living on campus, all of our EDHE 105 sections in FASTrack are hybrid, which means we're guaranteeing that all, by opting into FASTrack, your student guaranteed that they would have some in-person instruction this semester. And also, the events and the different things that we've done during Welcome Week and that we're continuing to do and think about, as I talked about earlier today. In the app, under these circumstances, I feel like it's that FASTrack is still valuable because you've got some professionals that are in your students' corner and are quite frankly agonizing day in and day out about how we can help best serve your student. And I think there's a lot of value to that. And I know that this will always be a special cohort of students to us, and we are wanting to continue to offer services to FASTrack students as much as we can for as long as possible, even after things get back to normal, which I hope is soon. So, and kind of another question about that is, what are our plans for the fall semester or for the spring semester as far as courses go? And as I've said before, I think it would be kind of a cop-out to just say those conversations are ongoing. Of course they are ongoing. You all know that. What I can say is that the numbers in Mississippi are looking better. Now they're all, anytime we hear of anyone losing their life or having to go to the hospital, that's terrible. So when I say looking better, I don't mean that cryptically, or I don't mean to in any way communicate that I'm not sensitive to the awful physical and mental toll this plague has tossed on people and the loss of life. But I will say that there are things that seem to be going on at the state and even the national level and the local level that would suggest that there will be more opportunities for in-person interaction in the spring. But again, it's trending that way. That does not mean it will stay that way. As we all know, the thing we can predict the most about this pandemic is that it's unpredictable. And I don't know what the spring will look like yet. I really haven't, as I'm sitting here, so, a reasonably informed university citizen can just tell you, I really don't know. I know that we will be offering sections of EDHE 106, which is a continuation of the first year experience. It is an excellent class that is focused on helping students become leaders on their on our college campus. And so if your student is interested in EDHE 106, it is a elective that will again be really flexible with any major. And it's taught by FASTrack instructors. I'll be teaching a section as well as my colleagues Kent Best and Julie Glasgow. Encourage your student to sign up for EDHE 106. I can say that will be in person. As far as the kind of guidelines, we'll just see what the CDC is saying at that point, what our university leaders are saying, but it will be in person. I believe it will be in person 2 days a week, but definitely in person 1 day a week. So that is one class that your student can count on in the fall that is a part of FASTrack and will be a good place of community, but also a way to really learn how to lead on this college campus, and how to get involved and think critically about what it looks like to be a productive, curious, and congruent college student, as I like to say. So that's what I can say about the spring. I know that is a complete, non-answer in a lot of ways, but it's the truth. That's where we are. So another question we had this week was about tutoring. So obviously tutoring probably works best in almost every situation in person. And I've had a couple of parents ask about, well, how can I get in-person tutoring for my student? So right now, obviously we can't, as the university, like encourage or sanction any kind of in-person tutoring. However, if two students get together and they want to meet, there's plenty of places for them to do that on campus. Obviously, we need to wear a mask and practice social distancing protocols. But as far as any formal tutoring you're going to get from a department, so for instance, the math department or the writing center and things like that, those are all going to be virtual. I do not know what their plan is for next semester, as I kind of laid out earlier, but right now those are all going to be virtual. And I know that's tough because a lot of students, that's just not, doing something over Zoom is not the way they learn best. And yeah, that's not a good situation. But what I can say is, and I don't just say this to try to, shed sunshine on a situation that doesn't have a lot of light. But I think it's important that we encourage our students right now to say, look, just as the way it's going to happen in life as they go into adulthood, look, you're going to have to make the best of a non-ideal situation, and it's about maybe reshaping our mental expectations to say, I'm someone that normally doesn't learn well this type of way, but I'm going to persevere in ways and stretch myself in ways that I didn't think possible to make sure that I get what I want, which is a degree from this university. And that again, but normally the things we're asking our students to do under any other circumstances would be unacceptable. And I'm sorry, I wish I had a better answer for that. And I'm happy if there's, there also could be, outside in the Oxford community, I'm not familiar with any of the tutoring services, but they do exist, and maybe they're offering in person. I'm not sure about that. And if you have a very specific question about that, or really about anything, and you haven't reached out to me, as you all know, my email is gray@olemiss.edu. I'm not shy about giving out myself, talk to a lot of you on the phone or via text, and I'm happy to do that. Anytime. I do have a 3.5-year-old and an almost 9-month-old and a wife, but I've got my phone with me all the time. And this is important. This is a big deal this semester. And I recognize that I can't imagine sending my children off to college, especially during a pandemic. And any way I can help, I want to be helpful. Those are about all the questions we had today. One thing that I've been thinking about a lot, that I've been trying to encourage the students of yours that I've been interacting with, that I think would be important for y'all to pass on is, and we kind of touched on it with Merv earlier, it is really, in college, the assessments you take, meaning the tests, the exams, the papers, it is very much the opposite of an exercise in memorization in all of those classes. So some high schools really do a good job of making sure that students understand and learn concepts, and some of them don't do as good a job, and that's not up for any of us to debate. But I know for me, I did a lot of memorizing prior to college. And it's really important that your student, when they have an exam and they think they've studied, a lot of times that means that they've memorized it or they've looked over it several times. Let's communicate with our students that studying means that you can teach it to someone else. And so it's a good idea, if they can, in one of their classes to try to meet someone or try to reach out over the various channels. You can email your professor and say, hey, I'm wanting to have a study partner. How can I get in touch with someone else that might be willing to do that? And when students have a test, that they try to teach the material to each other, because if you can teach it, you have to understand the concept. You can't just teach them the memorization. And so that's just a little tip I thought that maybe would be encouraged, that maybe you can encourage your student with. And also these events, please encourage your students to come. We are wanting to connect with them face to face. We know there's not nearly as many opportunities for that as we would like. And yeah, if there's anything I can do to be helpful, thank you again for entrusting your student to us in FASTrack, and we are so grateful. And have a wonderful weekend. Thanks, y'all. Bye.